Ian, for the work session, do you know? So if we want to go ahead and get started, roll call.
Mr. Bozen?
Here.
Mr. Nichols?
Here.
Mr. Amos? Mr. Childs?
Here.
Mr. Greider?
Here.
Ms. Wilder? Mr. Foyce?
Here. Can I get a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the agenda as proposed, as well as approve, well, nope, never mind, just the agenda.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. First up, we have discussion of some zoning ordinance with Noel.
Noel Anderson, Community Planning Development Director. So I'm going to turn it over to Eric Schrader, but basically he's going to go through the different actions in the zoning ordinance. Typically what we try to look at, we get bulletins, we get emails on what court cases are happening around the nation in terms of how zoning ordinances are worded. We have personal things here in the community that we look at that, hey, sometimes when you're writing an ordinance for an entire community, it doesn't make sense on an individual basis. So we try to learn from that and figure out ways to better word it. So, and then we generally try to bring those all together and take several actions at one time, just because it is a lot of actions to amend the zoning ordinance. So Eric will go over what we're working on right now.
Eric Schrader, City Planner. So our office has been working on some tweaks, fairly minor tweaks to the, a lot of them anyway, fairly minor tweaks to the zoning ordinance. For a while, it went before the Planning and Zoning Commission over a year ago, actually, for the majority of them, and got a recommendation of approval, and then it kind of got put on hold as we were kind of continuing to try and gather some additional changes being proposed and repackaged, went back before the Planning and Zoning Commission, and I'll chat about their recommendation here in just a second, but I just wanted to kind of give a brief overview of the amendment, kind of hit on some of the areas. A lot of the tweaks are very minor, just kind of cleaning up the zoning ordinance. There certainly are some with some substance. We're making tweaks in the home occupation sections, changing requirements for home occupations and restrictions on non-resident employees and the use of an accessory building as part of a home occupation. We're proposing to make tweaks to the accessory structures section to clarify that existing homes cannot alter an accessory structure in a manner that causes them to not comply with requirements that would increase an existing nonconformity, unless ordered to be demolished as an unsafe structure by the building official or designee. And that was an area of some extra discussion of the commission, so we'll chat about that. A provision for accessory solar facilities, tweaks to provisions for farm animals and stables in the A1 agricultural district, a provision for incidental child daycare. So that one is a really good provision to make the wording for daycares a lot more open, to allow daycares pretty much anywhere within the city of Waterloo, either whether they're home-based daycare or daycare facilities. There's a provision for cross-docking warehouse or shipping terminal. Again, that's just kind of cleaning up some wording in the ordinance. Cleaning up wording in both the M1 and M2 industrial districts for some of the wording that is for uses that probably no one uses those terminologies anymore, so we're just kind of cleaning them up, like rendering and refining of fats and oils, those type of uses. Restrictions on stacking of parking stalls, on how the parking regulations are determined. Restrictions for pole or post signs, and it's actually more of a clarification in there, and a provision for restriction on traffic control signs. And then there's a new provision for a special permit for utility scale solar farms. So solar, a utility scale solar farm, if it's a public utility, it would require special permit approval now by the ordinance. This tweak will ensure that even if there's one that is what would be considered a private use, not a public utility, would still need that special permit. Doesn't disallow it by any means, it just ensures that it's going through that special permit approval process. An exception for subdividing of lots when the lots are 4 times the minimum. There's a provision for subdividing of lots looking at the average provision, but we're cleaning up the wording in there that allows if it's more than 4 times the minimum, then that average provision doesn't apply. And then cleaning up some of the wording in the special permit section. The term special permit and conditional use permits are kind of used synonymously throughout the zoning ordinance. So that's kind of the brief overview regarding one area that I'll go into a little bit more discussion on is the accessory structure and the provision on whether or not a garage can be demolished if it would make that property non-compliant or more non-compliant with the accessory structure provision of the zoning ordinance, and proposed wording to create an exception for if it's being ordered to be demolished as an unsafe structure by the building official or designee. There was a decent bit of discussion on this at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval without making tweaks to that section, that particular spot of the zoning ordinance. Staff is still recommending it that it be approved as was proposed by staff, and we're a little concerned that if that wording were to be removed from there, that there's probably some additional wording that would need to be put in there to better clarify that situation on when a garage can be removed and how that works when it would make the property non-compliant. Any questions?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Amos.
Yes, I remember I was at that planning and zoning meeting, and one of the concerns was the garage issue as far as the way that it was written is a lot of garages in my ward are need to be torn down, but the problem, I guess, is the best way to put it is that there are many who, when that's torn down and the ordinance requires them to put up another structure, the cost of them being able to afford it, I think, was the main issue with that. So that was why I believe I actually made the request to actually, change that somewhat, because realistically there are individuals that in that ordinance, they will have to put up another garage and they may not be able to afford to do it. So, Eric, I don't know if that's what you're talking about as far as changing some wording as far as individuals who already have garages that need to be torn down, if that's an aspect of something that could be changed.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Boson.
Thank you. And I was at that meeting also. If the wording stays the way it is, because at a certain point, we required new houses to have a garage. And now, because of this, if a garage is demolished, it's out of compliance now with our ordinance. So now we have, our zoning ordinance, they have to replace it. But if they can't afford to replace it, they have a right to appeal to the Board of Appeals, our adjustment. So they have an avenue for an appeal process. And then there's also the ability to work with community development and Mr. Jones to get some assistance. Am I correct in that, Mr. Schroeder?
Correct.
Yeah. So as far as tearing it down, and because there's a part of that appeal process for the Board of Adjustments is you have, is it $250 or $300?
$225.
$225. I was way off to file that appeal. And we had discussed the possibility of maybe working with Mr. Jones to include that. And if community development is going to tear the building down, the system and tearing that building down, if they were going to file an appeal to not put one up, if we could put that $225 in that whole process so that they would have the money up front to file the appeal.
Or alternatively, there was a discussion on looking at a kind of like meeting income guidance
Yes.
to have the filing fee waived.
Mr.
Chair, sorry, go ahead.
And maybe Mr. Schur, you can answer this, and maybe not, that's fine. So what is the process? What's the appeals process look like? Do they have to go to a meeting? Like, what does it look like for folks?
Right. Mr. Schrader, staff, yes. The zoning ordinance provides for an appeal process. If anyone is proposing to do something that does not comply with the zoning ordinance, they can submit an application, filing fee, as we were just discussing, and go before the Board of Adjustment to have that appeal be heard. Yep, the Board of Adjustment meets monthly on the fourth Tuesday of the month,
And what time do they meet?
4 p.m.
Okay. So, and I totally get that. I just think that if we're looking at equity and we're looking at properties where folks can't afford perhaps to build a new garage, 4 p.m. on a Tuesday might be difficult for some of these folks to have access to. So I think that we need to just be cognizant of that as we move forward in terms of an equity issue. And I don't know how that changes, and that might open up an entirely new can of worms. And I'm certainly on board with working with community development and making those funds accessible, but I also know that even if you can pay it, getting the time off of work and transportation, because some of these folks may not have cars and so they're relying on public transportation, may also take up a significant chunk of time. I think we should just be cognizant of that. Thank you, Mr. Schroeder.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
now I haven't, this is what we're talking about in your office, correct?
Correct.
And are we talking about making it to where even if they can't afford to build a new one, that they'll still be able to get it demoed?
So the staff's proposed wording was to add, unless ordered to be demolished as an unsafe structure by the building official or designee. So with an unsafe structure, so ordered by the building official or designee, then it would be allowed to be demolished without a replacement one. If it's approved with that wording and someone was proposing to demolish one that was not deemed unsafe, they would either have to build a replacement one or go to the Board of Adjustment.
Okay, but only if unsafe structures.
Yeah, if deemed unsafe as proposed, they would then not have to replace it.
Would this
Even
cover
if
the
it's-
structures that I came to your office about as well?
Say that one more time.
Would this cover the structures that I came to your office for as well? The ones that got denied the demo permit?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
I mean, I have not personally inspected those, but as I understand it, they are seriously unsafe structures. So yes, they would be able to be deemed as such. And if this wording was in place, would be able to get a demo permit without having to be replaced.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So Eric, if there was somebody who was looking to have their garage demoed and they wanted to see if it would qualify for being unsafe, who would they contact?
They could either contact our office and we'll work with the building inspections office, or they could contact the code enforcement office, who will get them in contact with the building official, or contact the building official's office directly.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, Mr. Strauss.
So why did planning and zoning not want to include this?
I'm not sure how to answer that one. Noel might have better insight.
Noel Anderson, Community Planning Development Director. So there was some other city staff that was present at the meeting. that unfortunately we didn't have time, I guess, to talk with at the technical review committee, which is where we normally discuss those as staff to make sure the wording. They were still concerned that it wasn't open enough to allow faster demolitions without the Board of Adjustment option in there, or without being deemed an unsafe structure. So the Planning Commission then said, let's not move this ahead and continue to work that out.
So they essentially don't believe that this process will move fast enough to get rid of these properties.
I mean, I think that was the opinion that they had after hearing some concerns from the other departments.
Do you think that's true?
As planning staff, obviously, this is the one that we recommend moving ahead. We think that this will work specifically for the projects or properties that we're aware of that are out there that are unsafe structures. It'll get those going through quickly while still maintaining the ability for us to work with property owners for other sites through the Board of Adjustment process or finding funds to fix up garages.
So to council, what I like about that is I was on the Board of Adjustments for several years, and one of the major facets of the Board of Adjustments is in order to have something approved, it must have a uniqueness. And I like that this avoids going through the Board of Adjustments with this process, because it's going to be more and more difficult to find uniquenesses as we have more cases. So I don't see what the problem with the wording is here. I haven't heard anything else from anyone else. So.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
have you already has code enforcement already looked at this, and are they okay with the wording? Like, does it help for what they are wanting to improve?
This is Schrader with staff. We have had several conversations with code enforcement. I think they would still suggest that just not requiring a replacement garage, period, is the better approach, but we disagree with that assessment, and we feel that proposed wording accomplishes the immediate goal of making sure that we can demo unsafe structures without having that burden of having to put up a replacement, and still provide approval mechanism for anything else that doesn't fit within there.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, Mr. Childs.
And I agree with that. As someone, again, who was on the Board of Adjustments, if we just waive that requirement, period, no matter what, then you're going to start seeing abuses happen in other areas where people may just not want to have to deal with their garage, but it's not unsafe. These circumstances that we're talking about here there are a lot of them, but this addresses that issue without throwing the Board of Adjustments under a bus, pretty much. So I like that this accommodates the problem that we're trying to resolve pretty effectively without going too far to the other end, because we're as we are getting more construction, we don't want to lose our garages. Just like we just with the plan coming up here that we got parking for, we don't want to lose that in the city.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Amos.
So I guess help me, if you can, Eric and Noel, clarify this for me. What you are saying is you wanted the language to remain as is, but the changes that are in there actually require a building official or someone to designate that it is unsafe. And if it is designated as unsafe, then it can be torn down and that property owner is not required to rebuild it. Is that correct?
This is Schrader with staff. So if the amendment were to be passed with the wording as proposed by staff, which provides for the clarification of existing homes with accessory structures that are going to be removed, and the exception for unless ordered to be demolished as an unsafe structure by the building official or designee. If there was a structure proposed to be demolished and it would cause that property to have no accessory structure or less accessory structure as provided for within the zoning ordinance, then they would not be able to demolish it unless either it had that designation as an unsafe structure by the building official or designee, or unless a replacement garage was built, or 1/3 unless the Board of Adjustment they would apply for and be approved by the Board of Adjustment for a variance to not have to rebuild it.
Okay, I guess I'm still a little bit confused, but so what I'm hearing Councilman Childs say is that he doesn't feel that the Board of Adjustment should be involved with it simply because of the fact that there can be abuses behind it. And I'm fine with the fact of if a structure is deemed unsafe and they want it has to be torn down, I'm fine with the fact that, okay, it's deemed unsafe. And usually if it's deemed unsafe, it means someone hasn't taken care of it because they don't have the ability to take care of it. And that's my only concern with this is putting a burden on someone who actually cannot afford to rebuild it and are required to do it. So, you know, if the wording takes care of that, I'm fine with it.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess I also share the concerns that Mr. Amos has. And I actually think the code enforcement, I probably would adopt that position because my concern is not potential future abuses that may or may not come to pass. My concern is existing issues where citizens have trouble maintaining a garage, and then for whatever reason we deem them to be unsafe, which I don't disagree that we should tear down unsafe buildings, but then for whatever reason, because the structure is unsafe, we are now going to either make folks build a whole new accessory structure, which may or may not be outside of their means, or we are going to make them jump through a series of hoops that they may or may not have accessibility to in order to do something that we're deciding. And with city staff being divided in some portions on this issue, I do share the concern that we're inequitably solving this issue. I get the concern that we might have a spat of properties without garages, but I don't think that's as likely to happen. What I am concerned about is that we are going to push people out from being able to afford homes in some of these places because we're asking them to do these types of things. So that is my concern with the current language.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, Mr.
So I am hearing your concerns, but based on what I'm understanding as the language, I think your concerns are being addressed in this language, because if there is a garage that wants to be torn down and it is deemed unsafe, that person will not have to build another garage.
Correct.
Right, but that's an additional series of steps, and
So, from my understanding, from that question I asked you earlier, if they want to tear down their garage, they would call the office of the building inspections, then that meeting to evaluate whether it's deemed unsafe or not would happen.
Correct. The building, upon that request, which, yeah, I said there could be communication to code enforcement office, planning and zoning office, or directly to the building inspections department, and the building official or designee. The designee, I'm going to guess in many instances is just going to be one of the building inspectors, would go out and take a look and make a determination on if it is a unsafe structure. And upon that determination of unsafe structure, then yes, a demo permit would be able to proceed without a replacement garage permit with no other approvals needed.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. So then can I ask, what would stop someone from just allowing an accessory structure that they do not any longer want to maintain and just allow that to deteriorate until it becomes an unsafe structure so that they don't have to pay for an accessory structure?
That is a concern of the planning department, which is why we weren't real thrilled with the provision creating the exemption for an unsafe structure, but we felt it was a reasonable compromise to still have a provision requiring a minimum garage level and attempting to require that minimum garage level be maintained. But yes, that is a potential concern, that if it's not unsafe yet, I just have to not maintain it to the point where it is unsafe.
Run out the
Now,
clock.
there are, potential ways through the property maintenance code that could be looked at and addressed to force maintenance, but that's a big complicated issue.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Boson.
Thank you. And another issue that you're going to see out there is that when we start tearing down garages, people put a lot of things in their garage that they don't want outside. And now when that garage is gone,
You know what?
that stuff is going to be out in their yard. And you're going to also have an issue with complaints and I mean, if you can look at anybody's garage, all of a sudden you take that garage down, where are they going to put all that stuff? And then all of a sudden you have some unsightly things going on in the neighborhood that code enforcement is going to have to deal with. I like the idea that we leave the language in. I like the idea that we've come up with a compromise that says if it's unsafe, you don't have to put it back up. Half of these issues that we have with garages right now are just maintenance issues. Starting to lean a little bit, it's repair it, straighten it out, reinforce it, brace it, and your garage is back to where it should be. Because the roof leaks, it does not make it an unsafe garage, but that happens at times, that people are having problems with the garage. So I'm in favor of leaving the language that our planning department put in, and I think down the road, if we continue to have issues, we can readdress it.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem,
Yep.
how much does it cost to fix a roof on a garage? I'm not a homeowner, so I'm asking because I honestly have no idea. How much does it cost? $7,000 to fix the roof on a garage? So if someone can't afford $7,000 to fix the roof on the garage, what does it matter what they put in the garage, because they can't afford to maintain it? So it's more so an issue for them and their household to keep a structure that is not benefiting them. So I would like to make the change so that the unsafe structures can get demoed without forcing someone to put something back that they can't afford.
I think that's what this change is doing.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And then if they do, so the public is aware, if they do have that issue, they can talk with community development and go through the emergency repairs program.
I think that's what the last batch of them did, but they got denied a demo permit. And so that's why we're here today, is because
those were unsafe structures.
yes, and they still got denied a demo permit even though they were unsafe structures.
The unsafe, I think, the unsafe structures will get addressed whatever way is moved forward, whether we pass the amendment with the wording in it as is, or whether we strike all of that wording. If we strike all of that wording, I still think we should put another sentence in there clarifying, but regardless, that'll get addressed. If we strike all of the proposed wording and just allow garages to be demolished, period, then there's a interpretation of the ordinance on how that affects garages for homes built after July 1 of 2015 versus garages associated with homes built before July 1 of 2015, which was the date when the ordinance was passed requiring a minimum garage. Before that, there was no requirement to have a garage, period. 2015 is when that provision went into place, and this is to try and clarify, now that a garage is required, what happens if you have one and demolish it and therefore become non-compliant. So the unsafe ones will get addressed no matter what. So what's essentially being debated is the ones that wouldn't meet that criteria, but still there's an interest in someone to demolish them.
Okay, any other questions? All right. thank you, Eric, for you and staff's time and energy putting this all together.
Thanks.
And I think we've been coming up on the consent agenda to bring this up at our June 20th meeting. Next, discussion of downtown parking.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. So, as we've all been aware, I've been working for a while on trying to figure out what's going on with our parking situation here downtown. I've had, as a previous person in Main Street, I've talked to several businesses and about parking meters that don't work, or we used to have this, or we used to have that, or we need to have this, and we need to have that. And I'd like to say that parking will never be a solution. There will never be a solution that pleases everyone when it comes to parking. It's just one of those things that someone is always going to be unhappy about. But I wanted to bring to the floor some ideas from our parking company about what we can do in order to either not alleviate our problems, but kind of put them into one bucket instead of this kind of several multitude of things. We had a really good conversation 2 weeks ago, I believe it was, about what we're doing now, what other cities across the country are doing, what we could be doing to update our meters, to update our fee structure, and to figure out what they are currently doing now in our city. And we have Isaiah here from Reef, who is willing to, council, you should have all received an email from me earlier that has kind of the recommendations that Reef has presented to us. So we have reviewing parking rates and hours of operations. We have increasing the mobile pay utilization by increasing the amount of apps that we use. And then we have the big one, which is purchasing new meters or going to a kiosk system and how that could look. So Isaiah, if you wouldn't mind just coming up and just speaking a little bit about these recommendations and what you've been doing already as an organization for parking within our city.
Absolutely, thank you. Nice to meet you, Councilman, Councilwoman. My name is Isaiah Mao with the Public Parking System. So first we talked about residential garages, and now we're going to be talking about parking garages. So we have been the vendor for the city of Waterloo since 2015. It's been an honor and privilege to work with the city and build that relationship for the past 7 years. We have, I believe, 3 garages, several parking lots, and a little more than 500 parking meters that we manage. So we clean the garages, we staff them, we collect the money, we do the parking enforcement, we collect the meters, we fix and repair the meters. As you said, they're a little old, we'll talk about, so they go down often, so we're having to battle that. We also do monthly parking, and it's a little bit about what we do. We manage parking for about 100 other cities, such as Waterloo, but been here again since 2015. So Councilman Childs, we again met a few weeks ago. He challenged us to look for ways to improve and step up our game, so we took that to heart. We've been out a few times in the last month to just think about what can we do to improve it? What are some recommendations? So I put together this little study. I'd like to recap them really quick and then see if anyone has any questions. So the first one was reviewing the parking rates and hours of operation. So I believe currently the meters are 10 cents an hour, anywhere from 10 cents to 50 cents per hour in the busiest. We did find that to be well below the market rate for other cities in the area. We provided a study from other cities like Des Moines, $1.75, Cedar Rapids, $1 an hour, Sioux City, 75 cents, Dubuque, 75 cents. So we do feel it's well below the market rate. The last time it was changed was 2010, so about 12 years ago. And as we know, the cost of milk and other things have gone up, but parking has remained the same. And it's not about the revenue. I think Michelle will tell you that parking probably breaks even. It's more about operating the program, helping with turnover and helping people find parking more than it is a revenue grab. But if we increase the rate, it's going to help with turnover, because right now a lot of employees downtown and people will park and play the musical chairs. They'll move their car every few hours because it's so cheap. It's 50 cents an hour. So they would rather do that than buy a monthly pass or parking a garage. So that's taking up a lot of the important spaces for other people that may want to come and spend money downtown or run in and grab a coffee really quick, or people that need the accessible parking it's being dominated by employees downtown. So raising the rates will help improve that turnover. Secondly, it will help with what's called cruising. So right now, again, because parking is so cheap, people will drive around the block 4 or 5 times waiting for a spot to open up rather than going to a lot or a garage. So that's an issue. That's causing congestion, pollution, traffic. So that's another reason. But then thirdly, it will bring in more revenue to the parking program, which will help bring in better technology, meters or kiosk or signage, beautification downtown. There's a famous economist in the parking world, Donna Shoup, who recommends putting that money back into the downtown. So that's a good selling point when you're talking to stakeholders. The hours of operation we feel should be looked at as well. We're currently 9 to 5, which is well below what the other cities are doing. One quick low-hanging fruit we liked, I know Councilman Childs liked from visiting other cities, we've all done that, is the parking app. We do have one. I saw this in the lobby. I loved it, the download the Passport app. With COVID, a lot of cities, put bags on the meters and said, pay with apps, multiple apps, and a lot of people got used to paying with apps. I know my little kids are on Zoom, and my grandparents know how to order food on Uber Eats. So it's becoming more and more popular to do business on your phone. I think the problem we have is that we're just providing one, and people come out of town, maybe don't have the Passport app downloaded. They don't want to fool with downloading a new app and logging into Apple ID and putting in their credit card information, all that. So one low-hanging that doesn't cost anything is to provide more apps. I know Park Mobile is used in Cedar Rapids and Davenport, I believe. So that would be one where provide multiple options for people that already have the app. The other one is to provide ways to pay without downloading an app. Again, because of COVID, the parking app companies got creative. You can now pay with texting a number or what's called tap and pay, where you tap an NFC on the meter or you scan a QR code. Then the user may not, maybe they don't have a smartphone. They can call or text a number, or if they do, they can still pay without having to download an app. So again, there's no charge to the city. These apps typically charge the customer a convenience fee anywhere from 25 cents to 40 cents to use their service. So these are free to the city, easy, low-hanging fruit that we could implement to better improve the parking experience. Currently, about 20% of your users are using the app. The rest of them use coins. Our third recommendation, and this is one of the bigger ones, is look at upgrading the meters. We have some very outdated meters. We can't get service on a lot of them. I know I heard a story today. Someone parked today and the meter was down, so we took a picture of it and dispatched someone to fix it. But yeah, so it's again, we do think money is being left on the table from the meters being down. It's hurting our turnover and it's just bad customer service. Maybe someone gets a parking ticket, but they wanted to pay, but the meter was down. And we need to do better about getting out there quicker to fix these. But we could really use an investment into the meters to bring in more technology, such as the ability to pay with a credit card at the meter. That would really help. There's kiosks now. So again, there's nothing wrong with single meters. You park, it's right in front of you, you pay. But I know a lot of cities like the kiosk because it's less kind of street hardware on the streets. You just one kiosk in front of a block instead of having 27 meters. It's some cities look at that. Other benefits to that, it's you could put things on the kiosk such as maps and information, and you could pay your parking ticket at a kiosk. There's a lot of cool things you can do with some of the new technologies that are out there. We don't recommend making any investment if we keep the rate at 50 cents because it's, you'll lose money paying with a credit card for a 50 cent charge or a 10 cent charge at some of the meters. So these kind of all go hand in hand. And the last one was if we go kiosk, one popular thing a lot of cities are doing is the pay by plate. The customer inputs their plate number into the kiosk. Then they do not have to return to their vehicle to put a receipt on their dash. It helps us with the enforcement because we have the LPR where we drive around and don't have to get out and look at each plate and walk around. It does help with the enforcement and eliminates piggybacking, where if someone pays for a space, the next car comes and doesn't pay, there could be time left over. So it brings in more revenue for the city. But I do want to clarify too, we are our deal is a cost plus management deal, meaning we get a flat rate each month. That's our management fee. That's how we're paid. So whether we raise the rate $100 or $0, we make the same amount. So this is not a ploy for us to get more money. We just wanted to, based on my experience with working with 100 other cities, and these are recommendations I think the city of Waterloo should consider. And I appreciate Councilmember Childs challenging us to look at ways to improve this. And again, we're thankful for the relationship.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Question? All right.
Pro Tem.
Yes, Mr. Grant.
Jessica, could I just bug you real quick? I know that it's not your presentation, but I would just like to hear, and thank you, Mr. Moe, for this presentation. Jessica, I was curious what you are hearing as the Main Street representative for downtown businesses in terms of their concerns about parking.
Jessica Rucker, Main Street, Waterloo. It's definitely a mix. People either love or hate the meters. I would say the biggest complaints I'm hearing are consistency in monitoring them and the fact that they are not being well maintained, because there's constantly issues with them not working and people not knowing if they're going to get a ticket or not. I was not privy to this work session until I found it online on Friday. Otherwise, I probably would have been a little bit more prepared. But I think I probably have comments on several of the ideas that were presented that I would love to be a part of the conversation on as you guys review them.
Thank you, Jessica. And I agree. I again, going back to the equity piece, I'm not 100% sure that I'm in a place where we should ask people to pay more for downtown parking. I think, in fact, where I am, and I can only speak for me, is that we should move to less metered parking, and that we should work to maintain our downtown as a place that's open to multiple modes of traffic. I know that we have, and this is a broader conversation, but we're talking about downtown parking. I know that we've had some success in blocking off certain areas solely for pedestrian traffic, and I know that other cities have done that as well permanently. And I'm not suggesting that we make a permanent change, but we can certainly, I think it's certainly worth looking at having a broader conversation about what downtown should look like, who should downtown be accessible to, and who we're catering downtown for. So I think that this definitely needs to be part of a much broader conversation with all of the stakeholders. This is a good piece to have in our toolkit, but I certainly think that there's more that needs to be had with this conversation.
And may I add one thing? I know Councilman Childs liked this and recommended we talk and look at this more, but no, there's fabulous points, and we do look at that. And one thing from like the Main Street we've done in other cities is like a hospitality zone that allows service employees, hourly wage, servers, bartenders, dishwashers, hotel workers. We have a hospitality zone where we dedicate a part of the city with signage as permit only, where they can apply for a greatly discounted permit to park in a dedicated area or maybe a roof of an underutilized garage. And we found that to be a big success, and that gets them out from having to park at the meter and move every 2 hours, or park in a garage at maybe $100 a month that they really can't afford. And so we definitely consider that equity piece. And same thing, we identified maybe some meters that the meters are there to create open spaces, and we have some that just sit empty all day. We talked about, are there areas where we can maybe remove meters? Because again, it's not about revenue. If there's not an issue, we don't need the meters. But our studies and what we've seen so far is that we do recommend that there be paid parking, especially in some of these busy areas. But I wanted to make sure I talked about that hospitality zone. And in Tacoma, we have like a low income permit as well. So there's different things that we can do. Some cities are looking at, cell phone or mobile payment only. And again, there's some concerns there because there's still about 6% of the population that's unbanked. So we liked mixing it with kiosk and mobile payment only. But And then also we do offer stakeholder engagement as part of our management services, so we'd be happy to meet with whomever to discuss further. So, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, Mr.
I had a quick question though. What do we, what's our expenses per month? Because it does vary a little bit. And then what do we bring in per month?
Sure. I don't have that information. Our manager, who was supposed to be here with me that had that information, had a close contact with the COVID case, so she is not here today. I don't know, Ms. Reamer, if you have that information.
Are you short-staffed right now?
But we can get that. We are short-staffed because it's been hard to hire frontline. I think we're just down one though, because we hired a person last week.
I mean, because I had someone just test the enforcement one week, and he parked on East 4th Street 8 hours a day for a week. Never got a ticket.
Yeah.
So I'm questioning on the short staff how much of an enforcement issue do we have right now because of your staffing?
Yeah, that was the inconsistencies. We have had an issue with frontline staffing. We were able to get thank you very much, the minimum or our starting pay increased, and we did hire an officer last week, so we do expect that to improve.
Okay.
It's not just here, it's been nationwide, but those are excuses. We can do better, and we'll continue to. We've had several job fairs, dozens of job fairs this year trying to keep it staffed. It's a tough job, and we appreciate the team that we do have.
And I understand the reasoning about areas without meters, but then again, we have parking ramps to maintain.
Yep.
And the only way we maintain those parking ramps is through revenue that we generate on these meters. And the parking ramps are expensive to maintain. So I would hate to see us jeopardize our ability to maintain our parking ramps, or the fact that we'd have to bond each year to maintain those ramps.
Absolutely. I completely agree. It's a delicately balanced ecosystem. We got to be very careful. And sometimes when you tear out meters, then the busiest meters, people will go and park there. And so you have to be very careful, but we are looking at ways to improve it every day.
And since we put the automated barriers in the credit card payments at a couple of the parking ramps, has that been working out real well?
Yes. Thank you very much for that. I've used it today. It's been a big customer service improvement.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Famous.
Yeah, I was just, we've had this discussion as far as parking for years, and there's been discussion of even eliminating parking altogether. But to piggyback on what Councilman Bolson is saying, that was one of the issues is the revenue that was generated behind the parking that we collected for that to help pay for the services that the company is providing for us. So if it's at all possible, I think that that's something that we as council members need to see is the financials as far as what it would cost. We're talking about, going to different meters and things like that. Well, there's a cost involved with that because we have talked about that before. So for me, it's just a matter of we as a council need to see some numbers to know, because ultimately that's what it's about is the revenue that's generated and trying to keep the taxpayers from having to pay more money than what they're paying. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate on that we need the information to make sure that we're making the proper decision.
Yeah, absolutely. We can get the financial information.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, thank you. So as you've probably noticed, this is the primary reason I brought this up for council, was to start to get these conversations going. The one thing that I did really, really like was the additional app. That's something that doesn't cost us any money, and it's just easy to implement another way, so that when people are coming up from Cedar Rapids or Des Moines, they will already have that app, and it doesn't inconvenience them to download our app or to have a text by it. That's something that we can implement without any difficulty. So that's something I would like to see us move forward with at some point here. Just adding another payment option. It's really not that challenging to do. We did have a discussion and it doesn't cost us anything to do it, so why not make it more accessible for more people? The rest of the conversation I think we do need to have with our stakeholders, but I wanted to bring it here first. I wanted to see kind of what we're thinking here at the council, and I think I've gotten a lot of feedback, so thank you for everything. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right. If there are no further questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we are adjourned. And finance.